It is Ryan here, and I have a question for you. What do you do when you win? Like, are you a fist pumper, a woo-hooer, a hand clapper, a high-fiver? If you want to hone in on those winning moves, check out Chumba Casino. Choose from hundreds of social casino-style games for your chance to redeem serious cash prizes. There are new game releases weekly, plus free daily bonuses. So don't wait. Start having the most fun ever at ChumbaCasino.com.
No purchase necessary. VGW Group. Void where prohibited by law. 21 plus. Terms and conditions apply.
Okay, so welcome to another deep dive. Today we are going to be tackling the career of Joe Flacco, and particularly his kind of strange connection with the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's a story that has a couple of different chapters to it. And, we had that report come through really sort of mapping it all out, so it feels like the perfect time to break it all down.
Yeah, and we talk about reports and sources, but really, what we're trying to do here is get beyond just like the timeline of what happened and actually figure out why it's interesting.
Right, exactly. Like connecting the dots between Flacco's journey and the Browns, and then, maybe even zooming out to the bigger picture of quarterbacking in the NFL.
Yeah, okay, so let's start with Joe Flacco himself. The report reminds us he was born January 16th, 1985, which, makes his age something we can't ignore when we talk about where he's at in his career.
Yeah, right.
And then it takes us back to his college days at the University of Delaware.
Mm-hmm.
When you look at that early part of his story, what kind of jumps out at you? Like, were there any hints of the player he would become?
Well, I think even back then what's interesting is you saw the potential. Like, he had this cannon for an arm. He could make these throws that, not many guys could. And even though college is a different ballgame, there were moments where you saw that leadership, like that command of the huddle that you got to have as an NFL quarterback.
Right. And I mean, that potential obviously is what gets you drafted in the first round, which is exactly what happened. The Ravens took him in 2008, and then he's there for 11 seasons.
Yeah. Almost a decade.
Like a cornerstone of that franchise.
Mm-hmm.
They're in the playoffs a bunch during that time. And of course, there's the Super Bowl XL 7 win in 2013,
right,
where he's the MVP.
Big moment for him.
When you think back to that whole Ravens era beyond just the Super Bowl, what really defined Joe Flacco during those years?
I think, aside from that obvious peak, the Super Bowl is the resilience. You're playing in the AFC North. That's a tough division. And he was facing pressure, both literally from the defenses he was going up against, but also that pressure to live up to expectations. And I think he had this ability to bounce back. Even after a tough loss, he could come back and deliver in those clutch moments. And, you always had to account for that arm. That strong arm was always a threat. He can make you pay deep, which then opens up other things for the offense.
Yeah. But, the report makes it clear that after Baltimore, things kind of shift for him. He's in Denver. He's with the Jets, the Colts.
Yeah.
It's that period that a lot of people call the journeyman phase of his career.
Right, right.
What do you think that stage of his career tells us about just the reality of being a quarterback in the NFL?
I mean, if we connect it back to what we were saying earlier about the bigger picture, that journeyman phase really shows you how fast things can change in the NFL. Like, even if you win a Super Bowl like Flacco did, it doesn't mean you're set for life. Teams needs change. Coaches come in with new systems. Injuries happen. It can derail even the best players.
Yeah.
So the fact that he kept finding work, even if it wasn't always as the starting guy, it shows you his professionalism, and that teams still saw value in what he brought to the table.
Okay, so now let's turn to the Cleveland Browns, because they're obviously the other big piece of this story.
Yeah, for sure.
The report does not sugarcoat their history.
Yeah.
We're talking about a long stretch of, just straight up struggles, not a lot of success. And it talks about, that sense of frustration among the fans, but also this like deep loyalty that they have.
Yeah, I mean, they're passionate fans, that's for sure.
Why is it so important to understand that history when we're trying to make sense of the Browns and their quarterback situation?
Well, because that history, it's like the lens through which you have to view every season, every new quarterback they bring, and decades of searching for that franchise guy have created this situation where the stakes are super high and the fans are, desperate for success, but also maybe a little bit scarred by, all the disappointments in the past. So any quarterback that goes to Cleveland, they're stepping into that pressure cooker, that intense scrutiny.
Yeah, and the report points out that they've been trying to change that narrative. They've made big moves, brought in players, changed coaches, the front office.
Mm-hmm.
But it does always seem to come back to the quarterback position in Cleveland.
Mm-hmm.
Feels like they've been looking for that answer for so long.
Yeah, and I think this really highlights how important the quarterback position is in the NFL. A team can have talent in other spots, but if you don't have that consistent high-level play from your quarterback, it's almost impossible to be successful year after year. So the fact that the Browns have been searching for so long, despite all the different things they've tried, it just shows you how hard it is to find and develop that true franchise quarterback. It's about talent, sure, but it's also about fit with the system, the coaching, and sometimes you just need a little bit of luck, too.
Yeah, totally. So that brings us to the heart of this deep dive, right? Joe Flacco and the Browns. It's a two-part story, as the report calls it. So let's start with that first stint in 2023. Now, the circumstances were pretty unusual. He signed mid-season because they've got all these quarterback injuries.
Yeah, was that part of the plan?
He wasn't even on the roster when the season started, and all of a sudden he's the guy leading the offense.
Crazy, right?
What do you think when that all went down?
Honestly, it felt like a bit of a gamble for the Browns, but one that made sense at the time. I mean, they were in a tough spot. And even though Flacco was getting up there in age and hadn't been a starter for a while, he brought a ton of experience, Super Bowl winner, all of that. So it was a low-risk move because the season was already kind of slipping away. And he at least offered some stability, some experience.
Yeah, and he goes out and plays surprisingly well.
Yeah.
I mean, the report really emphasizes that, big wins, helping them make that late playoff push.
Yeah.
It even talks about how his experience and leadership, really seemed to calm the team down, and the fans really took to him during that run. Why do you think that connection happened so fast?
I think, in a city that's desperate for a quarterback who can just get the job done, Flacco, even though everyone knew it was probably temporary, he gave them this feeling of, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. He's competent. He's not going to fold under pressure. And his experience allowed him to pick up the offense quickly, make good reads. And the team, they needed that leadership. They needed someone to take charge. And for the fans who've been through so much quarterback drama, I think they just appreciated that he was steady and that he was winning games.
Right. And it was a good story.
Yeah.
But, it ends with that playoff loss. And then there's this uncertainty about what's next for him. Cleveland.
Yeah, it kind of left things hanging. Did he do enough to earn another shot, or was that just a fun little chapter in his career? It's the kind of thing you see a lot in the NFL, especially for older guys who come in as injury replacement.
Yeah, right. So let's talk about that bigger quarterback story in Cleveland, because the report reminds us that this has been a constant issue for them. That they've invested a ton in trying to find and develop quarterbacks, but that consistent success, it just hasn't happened yet.
It's been tough.
Why do you think they've struggled so much to solve this?
I think it's a few things, honestly. Injuries obviously play a role, and sometimes you just have guys who don't pan out. But beyond that, it's about finding the right fit. Does this quarterback skill set match what they want to do on offense? Does he complement the other players? And then there's coaching. A quarterback needs the right coaching to develop. And maybe historically there's been too much change in Cleveland, new coaches, new systems. It makes it hard for any quarterback to really thrive long term.
Right. And then we get to 2025 and Flacco's back in Cleveland, which is kind of wild.
That is, yeah.
And the report is pretty clear that his age became a huge talking point. When the Browns were thinking about bringing him back, what was your reaction when you heard he was coming back?
I mean, the first thing you think about is, can he still play at this age? Experience is great, but the NFL is a young man's game. It's physically demanding. So the conversation becomes less about, is he the starter, and more about what role can he realistically fill and how much can he actually contribute?
Yeah. And the report lays out their reasoning. They need a veteran in that quarterback room. He already knows their system from his time there in 2023, and they want to create competition. It seemed like they saw him as more than just, a sentimental favorite.
Definitely. I think they saw the practical value he brings. He's not walking in cold. He knows the organization. He knows the playbook. That makes things easier for everyone. And in a league where every little edge matters, having a backup who can step in and not miss a beat, that's huge.
And the reaction to his return was mixed. Some people were like, what are they doing? He's too old.
Right.
And others were pointing to his experience and leadership. What do you think those different opinions tell us about how teams and fans think about veteran quarterbacks in today's NFL?
I think it's a reflection of this constant risk-reward calculation that teams are making. Veteran quarterbacks, they bring knowledge, they have a track record, but there's always that question about whether their body can keep up. So you're always weighing that potential for experience and stability against the excitement of a young guy, someone who might have more upside in the long run.
So as we look ahead to this season, 2025, what do you think Flacco's role is going to be with the Browns? The report throws out a few ideas, mentor to the younger guys, reliable backup, maybe even competing for the starting job. Which of those feels most likely to you or maybe most valuable to the Browns?
I think the most immediate impact you can have is as that veteran presence, that mentor in the quarterback room. He's been through it all, and he can teach those younger guys so much about reading defenses, handling the pressure, the mental side of the game. And as a backup, he's a solid option. If someone goes down, he can step in and manage the game. Now, as far as competing for the starting job, I mean, it's possible, but I think his main value is in providing that stability, that experience in the quarterback room.
And the report even mentions, the impact he could have beyond just what happens on the field, talking about his experience, his football IQ. That can really benefit the whole team, can it?
And absolutely. It's not just about physical talent. It's about understanding the game, the little things that make a difference. And a guy like Flacco can help younger players see those things, prepare them for the mental challenges of the NFL, and, just show them what it takes to be a pro.
Yeah.
That kind of influence can really lift the entire team.
So let's zoom out a bit like the report does and talk about the NFL as a whole. It makes a point about how important the quarterback position is, if you want to win, and the huge investments that teams make to get that right.
Yeah, no doubt.
It also points out how guys like Flacco, even as veterans, they could still be really valuable. It really makes you think about, the arc of a quarterback's career in this league.
It does. The NFL is always looking for that next young star, but they also recognize the value of experience. Those veteran guys can be so important for bridging the gap, providing leadership when a team is going through changes, and sometimes they can still surprise you with how well they can play. So yeah, their experience is a huge asset in a league where, everything happens so fast and the pressure is always on.
Yeah, and the report also mentions how teams are always trying to build competitive rosters through the draft, through free agency trades. It's this whole complicated puzzle.
Right.
It's never just about one player, is it?
No, it's not. It's like you're trying to build this machine and all the pieces have to work together. The quarterback is obviously a key part, maybe the most important, but you need the offensive line, the defense, the special teams, the coaches. Everyone has to be on the same page. And what the Browns have been going through, it's a good example of how challenging it is to build a team that can compete year after year in the NFL.
And the last thing the report touches on is the media, how much coverage there is of the NFL, especially when it comes to player moves and all that.
Yeah, I mean, it's constant.
ESPN, NFL Network, all these outlets reporting on every little thing.
Every decision is scrutinized.
What kind of impact do you think that has on teams and players, especially at the quarterback position?
I think it adds this whole other layer of pressure. The quarterback especially becomes the center of attention. Every throw, every decision is analyzed, debated. And for a team like the Browns, with their history at quarterback, that media attention, it just turns up the heat. It makes it feel like they have to find the answer right now. So the players, especially the quarterbacks, they have to learn to block that out, focus on what they can control.
Okay, so to kind of wrap up our deep dive here, it's pretty clear from this report that Joe Flacco's career is a testament to, just how tough he is, how much he's persevered in a really demanding league.
Yeah, I mean, he's had a long career.
And his connection to the Browns, that unexpected run in 2023 and then coming back in 2025.
Yeah.
It's a pretty good reflection of how they've been trying to find that stability at quarterback.
Yeah, the Flacco story is like a microcosm of the Browns quarterback story in a way.
And the fact that we're even talking about his age now, it just adds another layer to this whole thing.
Right, it's another chapter in the book.
So for everyone listening, think about this. NFL teams, they're always trying to find that balance between investing in young quarterbacks for the future and getting the most out of these veterans like Joe Flacco who still have something to offer. What do you think is the most important thing for a team that's trying to win consistently at the quarterback position? It's a question worth thinking about. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
It is Ryan Seacrest here. There was a recent social media trend which consisted of flying on a plane with no music, no movies, no entertainment. But a better trend would be going to ChumbaCasino.com. It's like having a mini social casino in your pocket. Chumba Casino has over 100 online casino-style games, all absolutely free. It's the most fun you can have online and on a plane. So grab your free welcome bonus now at ChumbaCasino.com. Sponsored by Chumba Casino.
No